Hey y'all, it's Renegade, and it's time to spill the reality. So 2023 has been in the books officially for a few weeks now, but it's literally taken me just this long to complete my official backlog for last year's reality TV catalog. For what started out as any other year, quickly amplified by the writer's strike, which meant that reality TV competition fans such as myself were treated to a smorgasbord of content that started to pile up quicker than I could count. What this meant is that some of our old favorites saw growth in the form of longer episodes for the first time in like 23 years, while others saw success in the global market, with some versions having greater success than others. At the same time, streaming services such as Netflix, Paramount Plus, and Peacock really began to facilitate the birth of some iconic new franchises, including some very exciting and intriguing original concepts. So, while this is not the normal content I would usually produce, I've been a fan of reality TV since the very beginning, so I wanted to compile my personal list of the best and worst of what 2023 has had to offer. While not every single reality TV show could possibly be considered, so sorry fans of dating shows, this is going to be purely competition based, and not every single international show edition could be considered either, so non-English speaking versions of Drag Race, for example, sorry. At the end of the day, this is all going to be purely my opinion, and if you take away even just one new show out of this list as some binge-worthy content, then this is all worth it. At the end of the day, too, we're all going to have different lists here, so feel free to comment below on what your personal favorites are for this year, and let's get some discussion going, because it's all about the love of the reality. Now, before we begin, just want to apologize too, as I just recently got access to some of my favorite international versions of some of these shows. So sadly, Survivor UK 2023 and Australian Survivor Heroes vs Villains will not be a part of this particular countdown. But there are definitely plans to go back and watch some of these editions in more depth in later videos, so check those out in the near future. But let's begin with 3 honorable mentions that were super close to making this list. Funny enough, all of these are new original reality TV series from Netflix, which is really honestly becoming to establish themselves as a frontrunner in this reality TV show sphere. Now, the first of these shows is a series that I didn't initially think I was going to get into called Outlast. What it does is it splits 16 survivalists into 4 teams in the Alaskan wilderness and basically just forces them to survive off the land. Now, personally for me, I've never really been a fan of shows like Naked and Afraid or The Survival Man, just because although I am a fan of shows like Survivor, not really for the survivor aspect of it. So going into the series, I was a little bit hesitant just based off of the content being just they're there to survive. Basically, at the end of the day, they could leave the game on their own accord if they choose to fire a flare gun, if they can't handle it anymore, or sometimes they might be even medically evacuated, but at the end of the day, whoever is on the last team standing will win. Now, what really shook this game for me moving forward is the fact that at the end of the day, there were no rules, other than the fact that they had to be a part of a team. They can't be on their own. So that's already an interesting aspect, is the fact that you have these players that are used to being on their own and doing these survival aspects now having to be forced to doing it in a team situation, which definitely brings a lot of interpersonal drama just on its own. Now, also add in the fact that there are no real rules other than the fact that they cannot harm each other, and that is just a recipe for what turns out to be total chaos, because by like episode 3 or 4, things just devolve into total madness to the point where I was just completely stuck to my TV for a good 3, 4, 5 episodes, to the point where I had to see what happened next. Now, for reasons for spoilers, there's not going to be any particular spoilers here in this video, so don't be too afraid about that here. I'm not going to reveal anything on here, but I will say there is one person in particular that literally just shakes my world. Was totally invested in their journey from the start to the finish, even though a lot of the things that this individual does and their group does just literally left me just my mouth hanging open at every step of the turn. So I will say my biggest critique on it is that obviously there's not a game being played here in the traditional sense that there's not really any rules for them to be able to vote players off. There are other things that these people end up ultimately resorting to that are intriguing on a very different kind of level. And as someone who has a major in social psychology, it was actually just kind of very thrilling to watch in that aspect. So I will say, if you're someone that enjoys more social experiment type shows, this could be a show that you would really enjoy. Now, my second honorable mention, also a new addition from Netflix, is going to be a show called Pressure Cooker. And again, it is another kind of situation that involves two different aspects of the show that I personally would not really expect going into it feeling like it would work, and that would be a cooking competition and voting. It's been compared to a mixture of Big Brother and Top Chef. Contestants basically live together in a house, and there is no host. They have a series of challenges based off of cooking in different sort of categories, and the really creative and inventive thing about the show is that at the end of the day, there are no actual judges or panel that that actually critiques everybody. The critiques actually come from the other contestants. So it does become a lot more social strategy. A lot of it comes down to a lot more of who you know versus what you're able to do. Although those two different mentalities definitely go back and forth throughout the series. I also found myself strangely invested because, again, I'm not really a big fan of cooking shows. This actually made me kind of actually interested in one, because usually, personally, I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to watch a cooking show, I'm going to want to eat the food. So that part is a little still a stretch for me personally when it comes to watching the cooking portion of it, but the fact that there is now strategy involved into it made this very interesting. And I would say there was one contestant in particular that really goes above and beyond to try to play the game in a way I would not expect them to do. So it is a kind of very fun situation to have a voting game deep within this cooking show that I think adds a very interesting layer if you're not necessarily someone who is immediately ingrained to just the cooking aspect of a show like myself. So definitely say give this one a watch if you have some free time. Now, my final honorable mention before we get into our top 10 is going to be a show called Surviving Paradise. Again, also from Netflix, an original show. Reason why I like these Netflix series, by the way, is the fact that they are always short and succinct. It's not a situation where they're going to ever go into it really with too many episodes. There might be like maybe an episode 2 or downtime, but they generally will have enough to the situation where you're able to get really invested. And Surviving Paradise was really no different from that. Now, the concept behind Surviving Paradise isn't, again, too terribly inventive, but neither are all of these shows that we are on this list, really. They are going to have 12 young individuals who they think are going into, like, a bachelor paradise type lifestyle where they think they're going to end up living in a summer in a mansion. Turns out, not the case, because they're actually going to be splitting their time between this mansion, well, what they call it, the villa, but also the wilderness. So their goal is to work together and create alliances within each other in order to get voted into this villa, because the only people who are going to be eligible for a prize at the end of the day to win are going to be the people who have been voted into the villa. It is strictly social strategy for the most part. There is not like a whole lot of challenges, although they do try to intermix them, and for better or worse, it does kind of play with the format a little bit, to the point where the format doesn't really feel like it ever really truly knows what it wants to become. What we're really going to be the calling about this will be the contestants, specifically two characters individually that seem to just have a constant rival story the whole entire time that makes things just very enthralling. Again, not sure if it would be a series that I could see going outside of a one-off, but for it being just a one-off and what it is, I was invested throughout it. So would say if you have a weekend, you want to binge a series, I definitely suggest Surviving Paradise could be that series there for you. Alright, everybody, with the honorable mentions out of the way, it is time to get to our top 10. Now, the one thing I will say about our top 10 going forward, it is really a equal mix of shows that caught my attention for the first time and shows that are really returning and really kind of finding their groove again for the most part. Now we're going to go ahead and start off with what show could be the epitome of finding its groove in its second season, and that's going to be the Challenge USA Season 2. Now, Challenge USA, first season was a season of a show that I was very, very excited to see, because personally I am a fan of the challenge to some degree. Recent challenge, maybe not so much, but I am still a fan of the challenge format, so seeing that with people from Survivor and Big Brother that I really grew up with as my main source of reality TV was very exciting. But the only problem was is that first season really fumbled the ball at the end. I think we could all agree that that finale for Challenge USA 1 probably killed any momentum that I thought that the series had really going into season 2. However, they really, really, really turned the ball around and were truly able to right some wrongs that really left a bad taste in my mouth from the first season of the show. Now, as far as the cast goes, the fact that they introduced a few of their challenge veterans just to get some drama going was actually a welcome addition to the show. Just because I think that was the one thing that was kind of missing from the first season, is that there was a sense that it was just a game, versus the fact that the challenge, people kind of get a little bit more emotion going into it. So it definitely felt like the emotional drama was definitely a lot there. I will say the competitors also came to compete this season as well too. None of the newbies really slack for the most part. I feel like they all bring it. There's a few obviously duds here and there, but we're not going to get into too many specific names here. But I will say that a lot of people have really come into this game, I think, with something to prove, and a lot of them do so. Now, the main thing about this show, I think that is the reason why it's on this list here, is the twist, and it is called the Hopper. Now, what the Hopper is a lottery machine, and each episode going into an elimination challenge, they have to nominate one player from the losing team, which is done by the winning team, and then everybody else in the game will select either a male or a female ball to go into the Hopper. Depending on whose gender is taken out of the Hopper will determine whether a male elimination or a female elimination will take place that day. And literally there are times when just one vote could possibly change the entirety of the game, because what it comes down to is random elimination. You're throwing a whole bunch of names into a pit, into a hat, and who knows what the hell is going to happen. That is such a great method for chaos, and the one thing I think the show is needing to really change the direction of majority alliances dominating the game. Because what you kind of see here is the individual really having their power kind of reinstated, and I think that's something in the challenge that is very powerful. And like I said, the cast really brings it. I was very satisfied from the start to finish. I was very happy with Challenge USA Season 2 to the point where I'm very, very actually excited where this franchise is going to go in the future. If I have to say one downside, obviously, is the fact that the challenge format is very challenge heavy. So if you're not an individual who really enjoys watching challenges, you're going to have a hard time with this series in general. But for what it's worth, I think the product for Challenge Season USA 2 is well worth it. And that's why it's here to start us off here at number 10. Alright, so that brings us to number 9, which I have is Big Brother 25, that had the most hype that I've ever had for a Big Brother season in recent history, just based on the fact that they brought back Suri Fields to play again. And obviously Suri Fields, if you don't know, is a legend in the Survivor community, so adding her to the cast as the 17th house guest, as well as including her son Jared as the twist, was kind of a crazy start to the beginning of the season, and there was so much electricity, because we had been asking for years for someone from the Survivor franchise to finally get their due in Big Brother, and to have that person be Suri, I think for everybody, it just brought back a sense of nostalgia that this season really started this season off on such a great, amazing foot. The cast and the twist also seemed in the beginning like things were kind of really melting together, and honestly, for the first half of the season, I think everybody agrees that this show was just on fire. Now, with personally my personal opinion on Big Brother seasons, My common criticism is that things do generally last a little too long, and sometimes towards the end of the season, things generally don't go the way that you want them to go. And I do think Big Brother 25 really shows a glaring error with the concept of the series and its format, and the fact that things are just so competition based, and especially if you are unwilling to change the nature of the competitions and just kind of have the same sort of skill sets being utilized over and over again, I think it could really ruin your product. And I think we see that here in the latter half of the show, where things just kind of take a turn and they kind of just never go back. So any of that unpredictability, any of the things that were really fun in the season, feel like they just got sucked up super quick. But at the end of the day, that shouldn't take away the fact that the first half of this season is amazing when it comes to Big Brother. And personally for me, especially when it comes to Big Brother US, because personally I have had more fun when it comes to Big Brother Canada, but Big Brother Canada also announced earlier last year that they were doing away with the live feeds, which was just kind of like the craziest decision that I could ever possibly think of. Like, how are you going to have Big Brother if we can't watch people? Going into this season of Big Brother 25, I think there was a lot on the line here to really get the show going again and get the popularity going again and that fire going. And I think it half did its job. Again, I think the show, for what it's worth, was a fun watch up until a certain point, and then it just became the biggest slog. So I know that doesn't sound very good, especially for a show being at number 9. But what I can say is that the first half of the season just being so fire, and just anything kind of happening, and just, I don't even know if the live show really can encompass that energy that was really there and palpable, and that hadn't been in Big Brother in so long. And also including some of the twists as well, that it just felt like a very old school season of the show that we kind of really needed. So I do have mixed feelings. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I will say that if you are not a fan of longer shows, obviously at the end of the day, Big Brother will never probably be for you, especially not this season. But I will say at the end of the day that I'm happy I invested my time into it. There are some characters this season that I really, really, really hope we get to see on our TV screens for years to come. A lot of people that I really hope we never see again. And I do think at the end of the day, this season will be considered a very valuable learning lesson, both to future players as well as to the producers. I also think one notable thing about the show for this particular season that needs to be taken into account is that I think this is the first time Big Brother US has really had a cohesive theme from day one and actually implemented every single week, to the point where every single twist actually kind of fall under that theme. So kudos, Big Brother. Y'all are kind of learning. But let's just hope that you get the competitions back to what they used to be. And also, let's never forget how our game changed for the better when you joined the Mafia with Matt and I. Alright, so that brings us to number 8, which I have another new series here that showed up on our screens that I was actually very eager to see, which is going to be Netflix's Squid Game The Challenge. I was a huge fan of Squid Games on Netflix, and I'm not a big fan of too many scripted TV shows. Fortunately, I do kind of find a lot of them kind of similar in how they generally play out story-wise, and a lot of the times they can leave a bad taste in your mouth, looking at you, Lost, looking at you, Dexter. So of course I was obviously invested in the first season of the Squid Game, so the fact that they turned this around and turned it into a reality competition, I think was by far one of the smartest moves Netflix ever made. But I think the weird part and my biggest criticism, just starting right off the bat, is the fact that a show having 456 players and you only have 10 episodes to introduce everybody to them, obviously there's going to be a lot of people, a vast majority of these people, by the way, that we are going to have no idea anything about. And this show has such a notorious kind of pattern. It kind of feels it falls in with its editing, that I feel like by the very end there is a sort of a sense of just not being completely satisfied with the outcome. But I feel like for me, a lot of the time, sometimes it's not about necessarily being satisfied with the outcome, it is the journey to get there, and that is exactly what Squid Games does best. I think it did a really great job, and Netflix has this uncanny ability, I feel like, to find these people on their shows that are very real to the point where you're able to kind of really get invested in their story and the way that they kind of tell that story very quickly. And I, being obviously a fan of Survivor and a fan of editing and looking for editing clues, I'm the kind of person that I will see something, I will jump onto it immediately and be immediately invested, only for them to shut me down when the person immediately gets killed. But the biggest selling point is the fact that they have these games that we already really know, that we've seen play out before, but now you're actually seeing real individuals take these things on. So that human emotion really kind of plays a huge role, I think, in how things transpire and why things get so riveting. And I think the fascinating part was seeing how all these people take on all of these different tests, because what we end up finding out during the season is that they don't actually just compete in the Squid Game games that we know of, but there's also several elimination tests that take place throughout the season that really throw a wrench into the strategy of, I think, how people ultimately play this game. They announced that there's going to be season 2 of the actual Squid Game series. It definitely makes it a very difficult game to really know how to plan and strategize and play for, which personally for me is a little difficult, being a strategist and someone who likes to be able to plan going into games. Squid Games definitely feels like it's a lot more random, unfortunately, which I don't necessarily like as a game, but as something to watch, you could definitely do a lot worse. I would like to see some sort of ability at them being able to tell kind of like a coherent story for their winner, but at the end of the day, I'm very happy with the product that they made here, and I was very invested every episode throughout. Although, let's be real, the fact that this game even exists is still kind of hilarious, considering it's literally the exact opposite of what the actual Squid Game stands for. But let's just go ahead and bypass that fact. Alright, and that brings us to number 7, which I have ranked as RuPaul's Drag Race Season 15. Now, I will be very, very honest, and I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet, that I don't really necessarily like the All-Stars editions of the shows, and I think All-Stars 8 really left a bad taste in my mouth personally, because it kind of shows exactly what the franchise is notorious for, in that it feels like they kind of pre-select their winners and kind of build a cast around it. But for me personally, something about the main franchise of the series I will always be a fan of, just because there does feel like, to some degree, some sort of authenticity when the first time these people are competing. We don't know their public reception, we don't know how things are going to necessarily fare for them as far as how their skills translate to the actual drag race stage. So for me personally, I will always enjoy the main series of the show. But what I think season 15 did right is the fact that I actually really, really, really was invested in this cast, which is funny because I think there was a lot of controversy going into this series. Initially, the fact that we did have hour-long episodes going into it, and we found out that MTV was planning on cutting the hour-long episodes in the favor of the whatever that husband's show of WeHo that no one of us watched, The Real Gays of WeHo. Like, did anybody watch that? Raise your hand if you actually watched that. Nobody watched that. Let's be real. But I think for what it was initially a negative, actually kind of turned around for me personally into a positive, because I think they were forced to really cut down what they needed to show on the episode to the point where nothing was filler. If you go back and actually watch the episodes, they put out the hour-long episodes on Paramount Plus since the air date there. There's not really too much content that I felt like that was added there. And yes, they did elongate the runways, which I think is important. We spend so much money going into the show to the point where I feel like they need as much time really with all of their all their garments to show off as much time as they possibly have. I don't necessarily think that there was really that much more to gain, to be honest, if I'm being really fair. Because it really just felt kind of like an old school Drag Race season. I mean, seasons before season 8, season 9, I want to say they were all 45-minute episodes. So did we really lose anything kind of just going back to form? I don't really think so, because I really think that we got a lot of good drama for what it was anyways. Cast, always a lot of fun personally for me. Yeah, we can say that the winner probably was telegraphed from maybe moment 1 or moment 2, but I don't think that was necessarily because they were being pushed by production personally. I think they were just that good. And you can't really hate on someone being that good. But the rest of the surrounding cast puts up an amazing fight as well too, to the point where I think everybody has a lot of strengths in this group. There's people in every sort of category, and probably multiple categories as well too, as far as comedy, fashion, dancing, acting, singing. It feels like there's somebody there on this cast that can do everything, whereas some casts feel like they are maybe too look heavy, or maybe too heavy in the comedy, or maybe too heavy in acting. This group feels like they kind of touch all of the bases really evenly, and personally for me, I really enjoy the product that they have. Also, can I just say the lip syncs this season are some of the best that I think we've had in a long time, and 1 or 2 of them can easily go down in the top 10 pantheon of best lip syncs that we have ever had in the history of the franchise. So seeing that on the 15th iteration of RuPaul's Drag Race Main Edition makes me very excited for where the series is going to go moving forward. Well, I can say that the series in general, the franchise in general, is very, very saturated. When the show hits, it hits. And for me personally, season 15 hit in a way that the past couple seasons hadn't hit for me. So that's why RuPaul's Drag Race season 15 will be the only RuPaul's Drag Race, or the only season of Drag Race that makes our top 10 countdown for last year. And let's always remember Free Willy. Alright, so that brings us to number 6 on our countdown, and that leaves us to Survivor 44. Now, personally, for me, Survivor 44 kind of hit in a lot of the right areas, in that a lot of the strategy felt like it was on point. I think the premiere could go down as easily one of the best premieres that this show has ever had, and I do think there are some people on this cast that are huge, huge, huge stars. I think there is one alliance in particular that goes down as probably one of the most loved alliances in the history of the show. And the way that you're able to get just invested in rooting for these individuals, the fact that they are all different, and you wouldn't think that they would have anything in common, but the fact that they're able to kind of work together really makes for some very intriguing TV in that aspect. Because I feel like it's been a long time on Survivor, especially with the new era of Survivor and the fact that they add so many weird twists to the game, that it feels like it's just a big chance game at this point now. Which, personally for me, I think is the biggest deterrent for new era Survivor, is just the twists don't feel very cohesive, and they also feel far too often. Especially to the point where this season basically starts out by punishing players for just no reason other than the fact than to just get some drama going, which I don't necessarily feel is the best way to have your game set up. But, I'm not Jeff Probst, so it's not my decision. But I can say that I feel like Survivor 44 does at least attempt to right some of the wrongs from Survivor 41, 42, 43, and that some of the twists are a lot more fun. I will say the Idol Cage twist does bring an interesting facet to the entirety of the twist legacy when it comes to trying to find idols. I don't know if we could ever do it again, being that I think every iteration of what they probably wanted to see happen from this twist happened, but for what it was on a one-off, wasn't bad. But I think the biggest negative for Survivor 44 is the edit is very telegraphed, to the point where it doesn't feel like we ever really get any sort of big moves, because we kind of already expect a lot of it to happen. So while it is a real feel-good watch, I do think if you're here for the characters and you're here for the story, you'll be satisfied as far as the end result. But it does feel like there are certain points in it where it feels like you kind of are missing something, and maybe edit isn't telling us the entire story, but maybe a story that's kind of crafted in a specific narrative, in a specific way, that's leading to this end result. Which, I mean, to be fair, that's Survivor. But it does feel like this season is a lot more egregious of it. So ultimately, while I am extremely satisfied by the ending, there are some parts in the journey that definitely feel a little rough, and also a little long, but at the end of the day, I personally still really enjoyed the ride, and I think ultimately it does come off as a pretty mid-tier Survivor season overall, with some good characters, some good drama, but I just think it just struggles to find a lot of other memorable things outside of that one particular trio in this situation, and the premiere. But don't let that get you wrong, it is still a fun ride, and that is enough to the point where I put it obviously here at number 6. I apologize, I'm just a Survivor snob, and I will just always stand the old school era of the show. But at least I can admit it, and that is the first step in figuring out the problem. Our top 5, y'all, and at number 5 is going to be the 45th season of Survivor, which honestly, the fact that Survivor is on its 45th season and it's still considered this good to be in the top 5 to me is just a staying power of how amazing Survivor is. I've been a fan of the show since day one. It's easily my favorite reality TV show of all time, and I will say the new era has had a little trouble hitting for me. The 44 and 45, as far as I'm concerned, have given me a lot of faith that this show can kind of return to the form where it was before. As far as the format, the 3 tribes, I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, unfortunately. But as far as the shell of a product, if we're looking at like how the twists are set up, how everything is formatted with the challenges, as far as how we're talking production aspects of the game, with how idols are found and things like that, I think Survivor 45 really found its sweet spot here. Because there don't feel like a lot of those unfair mechanisms that were there in Survivor 44 or the previous seasons before that are really apparent in this season. It feels like they kind of really listened to what people were kind of saying and really realized that yes, there are ways to incorporate things of chance, but you also have to make sure that they're set up in a fair manner to the point where it's not just a game really ultimately of luck and losing your vote and having to go home in one episode. There has to be some sort of decisions, I think, that need to be made, and some sort of mechanisms behind those decisions to make them fair. And I think Survivor 45 does its best out of the 5 seasons that we've seen in the new era to rectify those. Now, at the same time, too, the fact that they had the 90-minute episodes, I think, was a blessing, and I think really goes to show how much care the Survivor editing team really does have for the show, because just the amount of just fun segments they were able to kind of put in throughout the way just kind of blew my mind. And just the fact you could kind of just really tell that they care about their product, unlike some other shows on this list, will always kind of make me really always go back to Survivor at the end of the day and really want to get invested in their product. Now, as far as the cast goes, personally for me, I wasn't as invested in everybody as I think a lot of everybody else was. I had a hard time connecting with a lot of people on this cast. I personally found them not necessarily the best game players, and sometimes messy gameplay is fun if it leads to an outcome that is unpredictable, but personally I kind of always felt like the outcome that happened was the most predictable result, so I wasn't necessarily enthralled at the end of any episode. But I will say the journey to get to these decisions more than likely were probably the most entertaining result. I mean, something happens at the final 5 that has never happened before in 45 seasons, to the point where I think that goes to show the caliber of game players that we're dealing with here. But they were a lot of fun. But personally, for me, am I taking any individuals out of these people for the long term as people that I'm like, I love them, I'm keeping them on my list? Maybe not all of them, but I do think as far as Survivor 45 goes as a whole product, it was easily the best season of Survivor that I personally watched last year. But I do know, again, there was a couple of there was Australian Survivor season 10, Heroes vs Villains, and Survivor UK that I still need to touch on. But as far as U.S. editions of Survivor, this was easily, I think, my favorite season that we've had since season 40. So, very excited to see where 46 kind of goes from here, and hopefully the new era just continues to surprise us. Now, at number 4, if you would have told me going into this countdown at the start of last year that this show would have ranked as high on my list of this quality shows at the end of the year, I would have laughed straight in your face, and I would likely have probably bet every single dollar that I had against it actually being a reality. Well, good thing I didn't, because I would be a broke bitch, because Big Brother Reindeer Games easily comes in at the 4th best reality show that I watched last year. And I think the benefit to it, unlike other Big Brother seasons again that we kind of discussed with the negative of Big Brother 25, is the length. The fact that there was only 6 episodes allowed us to really kind of get invested people on a short-term basis and not have any of that long wait that we have to get stuck in between every single week on a Big Brother episode, where we're stuck just kind of being all this filler in the middle of waiting for who gets the veto or who gets nominated. Well, we didn't have that on this season. We got to see 9 Big Brother, well, actually, let me rephrase that, 8 Big Brother legends and 1 person that was voted as a fan favorite for some reason come back. And honestly, the group that they got to come back were kind of all amazing. Like, a lot of them were not people initially I would have wanted back on my screen, but I feel like every single person is portrayed in a really positive light, to the point where I feel like if you hated any of these returning house guests prior to them being on Reindeer Games, you're gonna be turned around on them going through this season. You might not love them. You might not still put them on your top 5, top 10, lists ever. But you're gonna see a side of them and recognize and be like, okay, I could see why this person is considered a fan favorite for Big Brother house guests. And I think the biggest selling point to Big Brother Reindeer Games is the fact that yes, it is all challenge based, but the challenges that they have managed to whip up for this competition are things that I'm just like, it's like, are these the same people that did Big Brother 25? Because they're literally the exact opposite. These competitions are exciting. These competitions are actually, like, you need more than just one skill set to win them. There's so much more social strategy involved in them, to the point where I would say personally for me, the challenge that they did on episode 3 in particular, that episode could possibly go down as one of my favorite episodes of reality TV that I've seen in a very, very long time. I think what it did for me personally is it showed that the showrunners of Big Brother, if they are passionate about it, can really produce a product that is really good. And I think a lot of us off the heels of Big Brother 25 were just like, well, what are they doing, So, yeah, it is a Christmas themed special. So, yeah, it does kind of feel like, to some degree, kind of watching this, like, in the middle of summer would be kind of strange. And yes, it is only 6 episodes, and yes, it is only challenge-based, so there are some negatives in that aspect. But as far as what it is as a product, is just the game itself, it turns out to be a very thrilling watch from start to finish. And again, it has some of our favorite reality TV contestants from Big Brother history throughout the times, and I personally really just enjoyed every aspect of it. It was a really nice Christmas present to end last year. I don't know if I necessarily need Big Brother Reindeer Games every year, but for what it was here, I was very, very happy with the result here. So that's why that lands this here at number 4. Alright, y'all, so that takes us to our top 3, and let me just say prior to getting into these that my personal top 3 of the year are going to be 3 new shows that premiered this year. And it's partially why I really wanted to do a countdown such as this, because there are so many shows out there that I don't think people necessarily know about 100%, so I'd love to get the word out on them. And number 3 is going to be The Devil's Plan, a South Korean reality game show that is on Netflix. Now, The Devil's Plan, I think to me, could possibly be one of the smartest reality shows that I have seen in a long time. Because the game has challenges, yes, but they're all based along lines of a lot of social deduction games, board games, card games, a lot of mental challenges, not just based on who is the strongest, which is basically the complete opposite of the challenge. Basically, think of the challenge with mind games. So how it works is at the beginning of the show, each player is given 1 piece. If you lose your piece at the end of the day, you're eliminated from the game. So your goal is to try to get as many pieces as possible and constantly keep them, while also making sure that everybody else is not getting more pieces than you. And at first, it does kind of come very overwhelming, because each individual episode has its own game that is actually a very in-depth game that could probably be its own reality TV show in itself. So learning the rules to every single game does kind of become a little taxing to some degree, and also kind of slightly confusing because obviously, like I said, the rules change every single episode. And each episode, again, is very heavily based off of whatever game that they are playing currently at that time. I think initially what kind of seems like a very simple game on the surface actually kind of ends up turning into a very elaborate game as we learn more about the actual format of the show as it goes along, because there's so many smart things that the producers and the game makers do throughout the show that it really kind of turns into the TV version of an escape room, if I could kind of describe it as such as that. And watching the contestants kind of discover everything as they go along too, I think is part of the fun. And being that they are so creative through every aspect of the show, and there's so much level of detail, that in itself already feels like it's something that you don't necessarily see in a lot of just reality TV shows general today anymore. So that already made me invested. And doubling back to the cast in itself too, are all very individual people, in that it feels like they all are individual characters in their own route, but they all have very valid strategies, and you kind of learn a lot into every individual's mindset by the end of it, to the point where I feel like you kind of really get to know this group in a way that you don't get to in a lot of other shows. I found myself very invested with a majority of these people, which is funny because I don't even speak the same language as them, and a lot of the times, obviously, we have a hard time, or I personally have a hard time watching shows with subtitles, but when it comes to The Devil's Plan, I had no problem but sit here and be invested 100% in everything that was happening at every step of the way. I've always loved, smarter reality TV shows like The Mole and Who Done It. So personally, for me, The Devil's Plan, hopefully will be coming back for seasons 2. I think it definitely was renewed for seasons 2. Definitely renewed for season 2. And honestly, this show, I think out of all the ones on this list, make me most excited for what they possibly could have planned throughout the franchise. If you're willing to look past the subtitles, The Devil's Plan, I think, would be a fun watch for anybody to get you through a bored weekend. Alright, so that leaves only 2 shows left on this list, and let me tell you, I was going back and forth between these 2 because I love them for 2 very different reasons. But ultimately, I decided to put at number 2 E's House of Villains, which was probably the biggest surprise hit to me for 2023. It was such an amazing way to end last year. Mainly because, again, it was just so unexpected and such a brilliant concept. in almost that I don't even know if you could really count this as a reality TV show, a reality competition show, I should say, because it does sometimes come off so over the top and ridiculous to the point where it's just like, what am I watching right now? But that is the brilliance behind the concept. Now, obviously, when you take 10 of reality TV's greatest self-proclaimed supervillains and stick them into one house, it's going to be nothing but just chaos. And the cast knows why they're here, and they bring it every step of the way. I don't think there's any moment of the show that I was not entertained, even if some of the drama maybe seemed a little, forced, or like they're just kind of leaning into things because they know that's probably what they're there to do. Ultimately, that's what we're there for. We can't hate them for bringing the product that they know that's going to entertain us. And oh my god, do they entertain us from start to finish. This cast is so good. Honestly, all 10 of them really bring, I would say, something to the table for the most part. Yeah, there's a few maybe one or two misses for this, but ultimately I was very very happy. I was very, very satisfied coming back for more and more and more every single episode. I do think to some degree, maybe the point of the show at the end of the day by the finale was a little bit lost, and I'm not exactly sure if really the greatest superhero, or sorry, the greatest supervillain was crowned at the end of the day, but the journey to get there was such a wild ride. Again, I can see some people's criticisms on the show in the fact that some of the drama did seem, a little staged. Some people did have some, very shockingly similar situations take place in this show that may have happened to them throughout their reality TV past. So it did kind of feel like a little bit of a greatest hits of some of these people's, reality TV careers. But ultimately, why this show ranks as high as it does is because the general just overall tone of the show, while being House of Villains, is extremely light. Like, I could put on any episode of the show and just find myself cracking up to just the stupid things that these people are just doing and claiming and have happening on the show. So to me personally, I feel like that's kind of honestly the best thing that you could really want from a show like this. And you could really tell the editors are in on the joke. There's so many really fun, cheeky editing tricks and things that they do throughout in every single episode. It really feels like everybody is in on the joke. And because everybody's in on the joke, that makes you really feel like you could really enjoy the stupidity for what it is. And let's be real, if this is the concept for the show and you could get anybody you want from any TV franchise, just imagine the cast that they're going to be able to put together in the future. Like House of Villains season 2, like just I can't. My mind is just racing with the possibilities right now. And I will also always officially now look at tambourines as one of the most deadly weapons in the history of mankind. So thank you for House of Villains for enlightening us all in that moving forward. Alright, so that just leaves one show left, and I'll be honest, y'all, I may have kind of cheated because this isn't just one show, it's actually a entire new franchise that was brought to us last year in 2023, and I loved it so much, and honestly I feel like this show took over reality TV to the point where I have no choice but to put every single edition of this franchise at number one, and that is going to be The Traitors. Now, concept behind The Traitors obviously isn't too terribly original based on the fact that it is really just Mafia, Among Us, Werewolf, game by many, many different names that we all know and have all played before. But what it does is it brings it to a new level, because it's different playing the game when it's on your computer screen. It's completely different when you're now doing it in person. And much like House of Villains, I feel like this show has found such a unique place based off of how it does its casting. Now, a lot of the international editions will go with original casts, but the US version in particular has reality TV veterans making up their casts. And season 1 in particular, it has half a newbie cast, half of a reality TV cast, and let me just say I feel like the US edition really shines when they have the reality TV players, because the players that they have chosen are some of the legends of this industry. But even then, the format still shines so amazingly, regardless if we know these people are not going into it. I will say the editing, for me personally, I think the editors of the traders are definitely still trying to find their sweet spot. It feels like they have a hard time really trying to tell their story and keeping everybody involved. So a lot of time you will find a lot of people that you have no idea who they are until they're about to die. Which is kind of unfortunate to some degree, but especially if you make it like to the final 5 and people still have no idea who you are. But I think that's one small criticism for what ultimately is just a very, very well-made product. You could tell that the producers have really put a lot of care into the show. Even the hosts, both most namely Claudia of the UK and Alan for the US, you could tell that they care about being there and hosting their job, and they really enjoy what they're doing. And I think that passion really, you could really feel it in the ultimate end product, because you could tell when people really believe in what they're doing, and it feels like this group really cares about bringing us a amazing product. And I think the fact that the gameplay is just so open to interpretation, and that there's just so many nuances to the game of the traders that you could kind of look into anything as being something that's shady, but it's really seeing the people that are able to kind of hone in on small things that make people shady. So watching like the really good faithfuls find the traders, or watching those really good traders just steamroll and murder through an entire cast. There are just, I don't think I've watched one season of this show that has ended in the same way, and the fact that I think I've watched at least 6 or 7 editions of this show now, of even just the English speaking editions, that says something, and that says to the staying power with this format. Now, I had personally a really hard time deciding which was my personal favorite, just because I think between the shows that we got last year, between, I believe, Canada, UK, United States, New Zealand, Australia too, personally for me, I think my favorite 2 are US and UK for 2 completely different reasons. US for nostalgia reasons, the ultimate journey of the, because particularly for US, not only was I more invested in the cast initially based off of who they are, I was more invested in the journey of who ultimately ended up taking the win. In UK, it was a kind of a completely different aspect, in that the story itself that was being told and being crafted was just, I had such a hard time being taken away from it because I was so invested. And the storytelling in UK was just top notch to me personally. The traders, I feel like, it is definitely here to stay, and I am here for every moment of it. So yeah, that was my top 10 reality TV shows of 2023. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with my list, or are there things on the list that you would change? Well, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Now, I hope you stay tuned to the channel, because I'll have some more 2023 recaps coming up very soon, including my favorite reality TV stars of this year, and my favorite reality daddies of this year as well too. Throughout the year, we're also going to be recapping some of the other 2024 reality TV shows that have come to an end. So be on the lookout, especially for the next coming weeks. For example, Canada's Drag Race 4, The Trust, Traders UK Season 2, as well as some current reality TV shows that are going on, such as RuPaul's Drag Race Season 16, Traders US Season 2, Challenge 39, A Battle for a New Champion, Survivor 46, Amazing Race 36, and so much more. So excited to just be spending 2024 with y'all, and as always, keep sipping that reality, y'all. This is Renegade, signing off.